Hello my fellow admins and welcome back to another episode of Jira Guides. Void.admin here, and today in this video I'm going to show you how you can create Jira issues via REST API with Postman. So let's get into the video. So small disclaimer, this video is for Jira Data Center, and as a prerequisite for this one you need to have Postman installed on your PC. Just go directly on their official website and get it from there. Right, so as you can see on my screen, I have here Jira Service Desk project and a Jira software project, right? So I will tell you why this is important, because we have different REST APIs from Atlassian directly for different purposes, right? So the Jira Data Center REST API can create tickets inside the Jira software project and inside the Jira Service Desk project if you have in the Jira Service Desk project the permissions of the Service Desk user, right? Like you can see the backend of the project. If you have only the customer permissions, then for the JSM project, you need to use this Jira Service Management API. And I'm not saying that if you, for example, if you have both permissions, like the customer permissions or the Service Desk user permission, you still be able to use this JSM Service Desk, right? But for example, if you have only customer permissions in a Service Desk project, you can only use the GSM API and not the Jira Data Center for that specific project, right? So I will be starting with this, which is like the simpler basic REST API with Jira software one. So in this project, I have only like task, story, bug, and epic. For this example, I'll be using stories. And just make sure before you are creating the issue with the REST API, make sure to know exactly what mandatory fields you have on the screen before creating it. And one thing here which is important, for example, if you are using script runner behaviors and you're making some fields mandatory on the screen, just know this, that mandatory fields that are using behaviors will get bypassed if a user creates them via REST API, right? Because behaviors are working only on screen level on browser, and it will not get the validation in the REST API. If you want to get validation also in the tickets created by REST API, make sure you add those fields mandatory from as a validator in the transition from the create on that specific workflow, or you add them in the field configurations, which is not really ideal, because if you're adding a field in the field configurations, then that field will be mandatory everywhere. So if you have that field in transition, it will be mandatory, right? So just one important aspect to be mind of. So just try to look in the UI to see what fields you have mandatory in the form, and then use this issue type and project in the API example, right? So before we dive into this example here, this is the data center REST API example, how you can create an issue. But before you are doing that, just go into the settings of the page that you post, get, whatever. If you are using, make sure if you are using a local host URL and endpoint, here in the settings, you just want to select this HTTP version to auto. And you want to make sure that automatically follow redirects are off and the follow original HTTP method is on. Why is that? Because on localhost you don't have HTTPS, and then Postman will redirect you to an HTTPS, and it doesn't matter if you are using post, it will always get from that API, right? So this will not be helpful. It took me a while to find out, but if you are using a normal DNS like HTTPS, and the DNS, the URL, and then the endpoint, it doesn't matter, right? You don't need these features, but need these settings, right? But if you're using the local host just for you to test, make sure you have these settings, right? So after you got the settings right, we have the URL, right? So in the URL, you have this drop down here in the Postman, and for you to create an issue, you need to use the post one. So just select post, and here in this value here, add the URL of your Jira and the endpoint, which is /REST API 2 or latest, and then issue. just make sure that one thing that I saw that in my local host URL, I don't have /Jira, right? Because if you're scrolling down here in the documentation, you can see that HTTP localhost has /Jira, but I don't have it. And this was causing me problems. So make sure that you have /Jira, you introduce it. If you don't, just type localhost /8080 and add the REST endpoint here. And this is what I did, right, in order for this to work. And now we get into the step of adding the authorization. So here is the authentication type. You have basic authentication if you want to use username and password, but I recommend to use a bearer token because this is more secure, right? So if you don't know how to get a bearer token, you just go into your Jira, click on your image here, profile, and then in this profile, you'll go directly into the summary or the history of what you left on, and you have this personal access token here. And here, just make sure you create the token. If you don't have any tokens, it will tell you, but you need to create a token by clicking on this button here, add the token name here, I don't know, test, blah, blah, create a token, and just make sure you copy this token into the, I don't know, a password management website that you have, I don't know, before closing it. Because if I'm closing this, I'll lose this token forever because you don't have access to the token as you see here. You won't be able to see your token once you click close. So make sure you save it somewhere securely in order for you to use it, I don't know, in the future. So if I'm closing it, I don't know what the hell is this token in the future. So just make sure you save it, and you can select the, for example, when the token will expire, or if you want to have this token that will never expire. If you're using this token in a, I don't know, application integration, let's put it as non-expire because then you have issues, right? But for, I don't know, for a Postman REST API, it doesn't matter. So after you have the personal access token, you add the token here. For example, if you're adding like completely paste the token here, Postman will give you like a warning that you need to add it in a variable. So what I did here, I just added dev, and this is the variable in case you are sharing your screen or something like that. In order to be more secure, you just add it in a variable here in Postman, but it's not completely mandatory. And then as we completed also this step, we have the body. And here in the body, you're just basically adding a JSON body with all the variables that we need in order to create that ticket. So as I said, if you have, for example, mandatory fields, make sure you introduce those in the variables, because if you're not doing it, right, if you don't introduce these, you'll have an error, I don't know, that specific field is mandatory and you need to fill in, right? So let's break it down how this JSON body looks and what values we need to input here. So for example, this project, we have the ID of the project, and this ID of the project can be found in details. So we just go into the project settings, click details, and here in details, in the URL of the browser, you have the ID here at the end. In my case, it's 10,000. And then we have all the fields that I choose to add them in the JSON body here. These fields are not mandatory in my case, but you can add what fields you have necessary there, right? So, for example, here I have summary, test description, these are like string examples. It's not a really big deal. All the examples, you can find them in the API. I will just post all these links in the description of this video, so you make sure you check those. And you can add components, labels. Here you can say I have one label, and here, for example, these are the system fields, right, that do not have a field ID. The field ID is actually the name of it. But here we have also the custom fields, and I choose like one of these fields just for the sake of this video. We have a single select, we have a multiple select. This is like an array, and you have the values in the array. This is again a string, but this is a text field. It doesn't matter if you're using a single line or a multiple line. And the next one is a special one because it's not found in the REST API documentation here. I'm guessing it's in the REST API documentation for assets if you want to create a ticket there. So I just added here because I think it's important. If you're using GSM, I'm pretty sure you're using assets. So this is an example how you can add a value of an asset field. Basically, this is the key of the object from assets. So if you are going directly into the scheme, you see basically for this one, this is the key of that specific object. You have the key of the schema, and then you have the number usually. So then the next one is the issue type ID. This is pretty simple. You go in issue types, and here in issue types, you have all the issue types. Just choose this, for example, for my use case is story. So identify your issue type and then go edit, and the URL, you have the ID of the issue type. In my case is 10,002. So I have it here, right? So now let's clear this response in order for you to see how it's working. The next step is just simply send it, right? So we are just clicking send, and now we have 201 created, and we have the key. So this is the here below you have the results of your API call, and you have some JSON responses, right? Like, and we have the key here, which simply go and paste this here, and we have the ticket created just now using the API and all the informations from Postman, right? So this is the example for Jira software, and now we are going to the example of GSM with the aspect of not having access to the backend of the project. Basically, in this example, you can only see the project like this because you're only a customer. You don't have permissions as a service desk user, right? So in this case, it's a bit more complicated, but the format of the API is much simpler. You can see it has like 9 lines here. You have the service desk ID, request type ID. But before going into that, I just want you to create one from the UI, right? Because we need a ticket in order to get all the custom field IDs, because you're not an admin in this case, right? In this example, you are only the customer, and you want to create this issue in the service desk via API without using the normal flow or in the GUI, right? So here, let's break down the REST API. We have the service desk ID, which is 1. You can see that the ID will appear here in the last part, portal / and then you have the ID of the service desk project is 1 in my case. And the next one is the request type ID, basically the customer request type, basically the form that you want to create. So let's take this example, application access request. So when you click on it, the URL changes, and you have 1 here, which is the project service desk project ID, and this 8 is the ID of the customer request form, right? So you will be adding that in the JSON body, which is here, right? So now the next one are the field values, and here in the field values are basically the fields that are mandatory in the request form. So if user that needs access is mandatory, you cannot skip it, right? This will always be mandatory because we are using the GSM, what's called the GSM REST API, and you cannot bypass fields that are mandatory here in this form, right? So now we get a problem that we don't know exactly what custom fields are these, right? Because in GSM, you can rename these, right? Like user that needs access, this is not the custom field in the backend of Jira, right? This has a different name and it has like an ID, and we don't know, right? And also access justification. This could be like description, right? So now for this step, you just need to create the ticket. So I'll be creating this ticket with the editor. I don't know, I just add test justification. And I'll create it, and now I have the ticket, right? So Now I have the ticket in the list of my requests. And in order for you to get all the custom fields IDs, you again need to use Postman, right? And for this, there is one API, which is called Get My Customer Requests, right? And if you don't have like a lot of customer requests, this is like easier to identify it, right? Like manually. So you are using this API to get your, basically this is the same endpoint when you create a customer request, but instead of using post, you're using get. So here I have this, let me clear the response here. So I have the get here for this API, right? From the documentation, I have the same bearer token, but I don't have anything in the body, right? And these are the settings that you should be using it if you're using localhost, right? So now if I'm sending this, I'll get the results from the get API requests, right? So if I'm moving this, I see all my requests, my customer requests from that page, right? From this page. If you go in my request, you have all these requests. So you will be seeing those here, right? So for example, we need to identify what fields are those, right? So for example, you just scroll down and you can see what do I need. This is the first identifiers in your request list. And now if we go back into the Postman and we just scroll down a bit until we find the latest one, which is not those that are from a different project. And if we scroll down a bit more, now we can find the exact ones that we created just now, 1 minute ago, right? And these are like user that needs access. You see the label. This is the name in the customer request type, right? So we have the requested field values, and here you can see the custom field ID. So user that needs access, you see the field here, it has this custom field ID. Now scroll down a bit more, and then you can see also the name, like the value, right? The value is name, which is this one, right? And you also have the value type. The next field is application. You can see application here. If you check it here, you can see label application, and we also have the custom field ID, which is 10,700. And we still have another field here, which is called access justification. And in this case, if we choose access justification, we can actually see that this is not a custom field. This is the system field, which is called description, but it has been renamed to access justification to appear in that form in the customer request form. So we also have the values. And just for your example here, you have all these 3 fields that are found here, and you know exactly what you need to add in your body to create this customer request type via the API. So you know, for example, for user that needs access, you know the custom field ID, you know how to give the values. They're like, this is, for example, a user, and you can find this, how you can give a user, right? So if you scroll down here, and you can see where is this single user picker, right? So you can see that it will give the custom field ID and then the parameter, which is the name, right, of the user. So here you can see the name. So you'll be using this name, right, in your request form. And now if we go back into our example, as I said, the ID of the service desk project, the ID of the customer request type, and now you have the custom field, which is the single user field, which user that needs access. We have the ID from the asset field, which is the application, and here we have the description, which is the like the multi-line select text field, which is the system field, right? So now, if we want to create this, let's just justification from API, right? So we exactly know the ticket, right? So now if we're sending it, post, we get created, and the issue key is VSD23, right? So now we just change it here to a 23, and here is the ticket that you created via the API just now. you see details, and all of these are just created. So this is the example of using the GSM API, which is this one, in case you only have permissions as a user, as a customer, right? But I also have another example where we'll be using the API from Data Center to create a GSM, an issue in a GSM project, right? Because you can do this if you have the permissions of a service desk user, right? If you can see this, a service desk project like this, right? Like you can go project settings, not exactly in project settings because you need to be an admin, but for example, in the permissions, in my permissions, for example, you can see that in order to create issues, we need to be in the service desk team, right? So this is like a project role, but besides the project role, you also need to have the license of a service desk user, right? So in order to be able to exactly see this view here. So as I said, if you have this permission, you can use this Data Center API in order to create a ticket, but we have different example, right? So we'll be using the same as you see here, right? Like we are using because we are using the same API, you also using the same body example, but here is a bit different, right? I choose exactly the fields that we have mandatory in this request form that we have, in this one, right? But because you are creating the ticket from the back end of the project, basically you are creating the ticket from here. So you are in a service desk project, but you're not creating from a customer request point of view. You're just creating using this create button. So in this way, you need the issue type, for example. You need the customer request type, because if you don't add a customer request type, that ticket will not be, you will not have a customer request type, right? That's why I have it here in the create view, because if you don't have it, you cannot create it from API. It will get rejected because you don't have the field in the create screen. So using the same first example here, we have the fields, which is the project ID. And here you can see that this is different because we are using this project ID. If we go in details, it's 10,200. And here we have the summary, create via from the Postman. We have this description. Now we have the same fields that we are using in the customer request form, like the user that needs access, and also the application, which is an asset custom field. And now we have this one, right? So this is the special thing. This is the customer request type. And as I said, because you are creating the ticket from the backend, this customer request type is not added automatically as you did here, right? So here in the second example, we don't need to add the customer request type because this is already here. Like this API identifies that this is the customer request type and it will add it automatically into that field. But because they are using different API to create this ticket, we need to input this value of the customer request type that we want to add, right? So it's there is a simple way that I learned this from a colleague. Like you just need to have this customer request type created that you want to create via the API. And here you need to have access in the backend of this ticket, right? You can see the ticket here. So you can see the customer request type is application access request, right? But this, you cannot add it as a simple string. This has like a special format, right? So in order for you to get this value, how it looks like in the backend for the API to work, just click on the export and export this issue to XML, and you will see it why. After you export to XML, you can see if you scroll down a bit, you'll find the value of this custom field. Let me find it. So it should look with the key of the project in the front. So here it is. Like it's a bit hard to find it. Let me. I cannot zoom in. Yeah. So the custom field that looks as a value with the key of the project. So this is the key of the project VSD, and then it has this weird string. This is the value that you need to add it here in order for Jira to add this value as the customer request type, and make sure also to to have customer request type in the create screen of this request, right? I have added here customer request type because you need it. You cannot create a ticket without it. So I added the custom field ID, which you can, by the way, see it here, 10,403, which is like this from service desk. And then you add the value simply as a string. You don't need anything else. And then we have the same, as in the same example that we had, we have the issue type ID, which is 10,202, because this is the, how it's called, this is the service request with approval. So if we go in the custom fields now, not custom fields, sorry, issue types, and we find it service request with approvals, click edit, you can see the ID in the URL of this issue type. And now we have everything. From Postman, we can do it for YouTube, right? So we have the name, we can identify it. And now we just send it. And as you can see, it was created with VST24 and just paste it here. And now you can see that it was created just now for YouTube, and it has all these values. And also you can see it has the customer request type added here. So you can actually use the API for Data Center to create a GSM ticket, but you are creating the GSM ticket from the backend because in this case, you will have the permissions of a service desk user. If you don't have the permissions, you need to use this documentation here and the API in order for you to create it as a customer, which is this one, right? So that's basically it. These are all three examples, and the get, how you can get all the IDs as a customer. And honestly, that's pretty much it for this video today. I hope you enjoy it. I hope you learned something today. And yeah, as I said, I will add all of these documentations, links, examples in the description of this video. You will find also the link to GitHub, because on GitHub I'll add all these examples that I used in Postman. And yeah, if you want to learn more about Jira Script Runner, you can find other videos on my channel. Just like this video if you liked it. A subscribe will also help. And by the way, we also have a small community on Discord, so you'll find that link also down below. And I don't know, until the next video, peace.